Hey there, welcome to Goblin Girl Studio. So, contrary to popular belief, I'm not just a pair of disembodied hands. I have a face and everything. I know this is probably gonna come as a big shock to all 60 of my subscribers, but I promise this is way scarier for me than it is for you. So, for this video, I wanted to make a super cute, head-empty, posable little mouse figurine. Shouldn't be too hard. So, let's get started. Do you ever feel like when you see drawings or sculptures of little animals in old-timey clothes, they just kind of have this dead-eyed thousand-yard stare, like maybe they've seen so many horrors that they've gone into a trance-like state where they've forgotten everything except for being cute and breathing? That's kind of what I'm going for with this design. I think that boils down to a tiny little character with big eyes and big ears, probably a simple turn-of-the-century type dress with puff sleeves and an apron, and a little straw hat, maybe with some flowers that go around the brim. For the colors, I used to have this pet rat named Tombo who was really cute, and I think his tan and white coloring would look really sweet on her. And pink feels like the obvious choice for the dress. Maybe I'll do some green accents for the hat ribbon and stuff. Okay, so I'm kind of obsessed with this design, so let's make her. The first step is the armature, which is like the wire skeleton of the character, but I gotta confess something to you. I've already done this wrong 3 times now. It was a lot of different issues, using the wrong kind of wire, the scaling being off, stuff like that. But after all that work, at least I can salvage this little face that I sculpted for one of the armatures, so I'm gonna show you how I made that first, actually. I want the face to be replaceable so I can change out her expression for different scenarios. Like, if someone accuses this little mouse of murder, I can switch her to a surprised expression. And if later she's exonerated, I can give her a relieved expression, basic stuff like that. So in order to do that, I start by baking a little base of clay with magnets embedded into it that line up with magnets that are on the back of the head of the armature. That gives me something to sculpt on top of. So sculpting is just putting lumps on lumps. Once I had a good base lump, I shoved in 2 bead lumps for the eyes, and then I can start refining all the detail lumps. I keep looking at my reference and I'm realizing that it's kind of a very 2D design, and it's hard to sculpt this facing forward but also looking down kind of a face. She keeps becoming kind of elongated and alien in my attempts to match that. And at worst, this nose-muzzle combination started to look a little X-rated, so I had to recalibrate a bit. I moved her nose and mouth lumps up and her eye lumps down, and she turned out pretty cute in the end. Her eyes are maybe a little bit small, but I'll live with it. That was a fun break, but now I gotta make another armature and hope it actually turns out right this time. This time I'm using copper and armature wire. I cut out like 3 pieces of wire per appendage and lash them together with string. The key is to scratch your hands on the jagged edges of the wire as much as possible because the blood strengthens them. Next, I take these wire sticks and I bend them into the general shapes that they need. An insecure 6 for the spine, a kid's drawing of a seagull for the arms, and for the legs, totally straight, like you claimed to be in middle school. Then it only takes 3 forms of stickum to actually bond these wires together. String to hold it together long enough for the baking soda and superglue to dry, and then baking soda and superglue to hold it together long enough for the epoxy putty to dry. Yes, I'm certain this is the most efficient process for this. Oh, and somewhere in here I twisted on a little wire tail for her as well. Can't forget that. Then I bend her leg wires into the shape of wires meant to look like legs, and we're ready to put some little feet on her. Oh, but first I want to superglue these tiny nuts into her feet so that I can screw her into a diorama later. Yes, I'm making dioramas too, and yes, I'm okay, I don't understand why you all keep asking. Now I can screw it down and start sculpting her little feet. To sculpt a dainty little mouse foot, I first slather on a big blob of magic sculpt. So if you watched my mole making video, you would know that I was sent to craft jail for not wearing gloves while working with epoxy sculpt, and this mouse was actually made simultaneously to when I made that mole, so it was before I knew about the glove epoxy rule. So what I'm saying is, please don't send me back to craft jail. I won't make it in there. The only craft they let me do is scrapbooking. I carve out the general shape, trying to get as close to the wires as I can, because I cannot stress to you enough how tiny this mouse is. Every step of this is just like a battle against bigness. I score the lines for the toes and notch out little triangles at the end to give her pointed nails. I'm trying to think about mouse anatomy while I do this, but I gotta stress to you that I only thought about it. I didn't actually look it up. Once it's fully cured, I can remove the foot from the base and screw in the other one, which for some reason won't screw in, because apparently sometimes when you buy nuts there's a manufacturing issue where they don't have a thread inside. Is this common, or did I just find the inverted Jenny of nuts? I was about to throw the armature away and never touch another craft ever again when my partner just Googled it and said that you can remove superglue with acetone. With nothing else to lose, I set the foot in a little hot tub of nail polish remover, and what do you know? It worked! My faith in crafts is restored yet again! I glued in a new nut, then sculpted a little foot around it just like the first one. Next up in the armature department is the hands. Maybe this is gonna be way oversimplified, but I'm really just taking 3 folded up wires and trying to make them hand-shaped. I'm shooting for 4 fingers because her hand is like the size of my fingertip, and I just don't know how I'd be able to fit 5 fully posable fingers in there. I attach these little hand skeletons to my armature with my typical 3-part system. Now for one of my favorite steps, let's make some tiny ears. My main ear ingredient is Worbla, which is this really cool thermoplastic that can be softened with a hairdryer and then shaped and stuck together however you want. I cut out a piece for the front and the back of each ear and then heated them up until they were flexible and sticky and my fingies had turned into little cooked sausages. From there, I could join the 2 pieces at the top edge. Then in between the pieces of the ear, I insert a little bit of wire with some cured magic sculpt at the end in a little paddle shape. This is what will give my ears the ability to move and pose around a bit. Once they've cooled down, I use a little 2-part liquid epoxy to make a strong earwax that will keep the wires firmly in place inside the ears. And these ears need someplace to go, so let's make the back of the head. Since I want to salvage this face sculpt and it already has the grooves and magnets on it, I'm gonna have to reverse engineer the back of the head to line up with it. I'm a little worried because the face went through some retrofitting to make it match up to previous armatures that I threw away, and now it's a little bulky and kind of sticks out weird, but I think it'll be okay. Either way, this whole armature is done, thank God or whatever, and we can move on to the next step, building out the body with foam. I mostly use like a cushion foam for this. This is just a ton of cutting hunks of foam and using barge glue to sandwich them around the wires and body until she's turned into a giant marshmallow. But rather than roast her, I trim her down bit by bit until I can reveal her true mousy form underneath. I add some foam to the spots I missed, like her neck and her little butt, and with those foamed out, she's ready for heavy-duty hand and tail foaming. And by heavy duty, I mean small, delicate pieces of foam fused together with balloon latex and meticulously carved into the most detailed parts of the body in preparation of getting a layer of skin added over them. Okay, that wasn't too hard. I'm feeling like this will maybe all work out after all. So as a treat, let's do one of the most satisfying steps. Painting. This is pretty self-explanatory. I prime the face with Mod Podge and then I paint it with crappy craft store paints. There, now you have all my secrets. Since there's not much more to say than that, this is where I make you listen to my silly little lore about this silly little mouse. Miss Mouse is the cutest, most empty-headed, gullible little critter in the village of Dingley Dell. She will believe anything you tell her. Like, hypothetically, say you were trying to get the local PI off your tail, so you tell Miss Mouse that it was her who stole the cherry tart from Mr. Toad's windowsill, not you. She'd probably say,
"Oh my goodness, how could I?"
and then immediately pack up her bindle to leave town and start life as a fugitive. I mean, come on, not that you should, it's just an example. Everyone felt really bad about it the last time that happened, but you get the idea. She just doesn't seem to think that anyone would ever lie to her. She's got all kinds of funny ideas too. She once suggested that the seasons are controlled by the spinning of the Earth's axis in relation to the sun? Which is obviously untrue. The seasons are controlled by fairy magic, but you know, every town needs a free thinker, I guess. She's a bit lazy though. Whenever she's not doing one of her little hobbies, like being the town doctor and the lawyer and the mayor, you'll find her just frolicking in fields, picking flowers, laying on the grass, watching the clouds roll by. I mean, come on, some of us have jobs. So she may be a bit strange, but who isn't in the village of Dingley Dell? That's what we love about her. Alright, that's it. That's my lore for today. Thanks to my neighbor Kayleigh Lascio for doing the voice of Miss Mouse. And I'm loving these colors. She looks so sweet. So now that the painting's out of the way, we can move on to the latex skin. There's more than one way to skin a mouse, but this is the only one that I know. Just dip her in latex a bunch of times. This is, I think, a fairly common stop-motion puppet making technique. Don't tell anyone, but pretty much all of the techniques I'm using to make this are stop-motion puppet techniques. One might even say that I'm actually making a stop-motion puppet. but I'm not planning on animating it, so what is it then? The last step is a light dusting of baby powder so it looks more like skin and less like Britney Spears' Oops, I Did It Again bodysuit. I feel like the hands are a little bit big and gummy, but I just don't think I could get them any smaller with this technique, so I'll live with it. After the skin, of course what comes next is the fur. I quickly glue some fur strips to her neck with fabric tack and stitch together the edges. Then I can move on to her face. I glue strips of fur starting from the outside and then work inwards. The main thing I'm thinking about is getting the fur direction to basically all radiate from the center of the face. Then comes my favorite part, tedium. I put down a little dot of glue, cut out a little tuft of fur, and then apply it as perpendicularly as I can. And then I do it again and again and again and again and again and again. This step is like a roller coaster. It's gotta look terrible before it looks good, so it requires a lot of trust in the process. And I don't really have that, so what it actually requires is a full-blown crafty meltdown, an existential spiral, and then hopeless resignation. This is kind of like trusting in the process, but it's got more of a, I don't know, man, how else am I gonna do it type of a spin. So then I can take that energy and move forward to make the muzzle fuzzy with a static flocker, which looks kind of cool. Finally, I use a Mod Podge and water soup to slick back all the hair for a sleeker look, and I think it actually looks pretty good. I guess it was fine the whole time. I'll definitely remember that for next time. With that, her whole body is finished, so now I just gotta make her clothes. I feel like I don't really know how to describe the sewing step. It's just kind of like, I sewed this. And I sewed this. Then I sewed this. Maybe that means I should just throw on some music and let you watch while it happens, rather than me describing what you can already see is happening on the screen. So here, enjoy some new music that my partner Jakey made for this video. Okay, I gotta jump in here and say that I'm hemming this wire into the bottom of her dress so that the fabric hangs a little bit more naturally, and so that I can make it look like her dress is like blowing in the wind if I want, which I think is gonna look super cute. Okay, shutting up again while I make her apron. And the costume is done. Okay, that's pretty cute. From here, all that is left is the little straw hat. I did consider trying to weave her a straw hat with this collection of pine needles that I've been collecting from the local park for the last 3 years, but I don't know. Maybe I'll just hold on to them for a little while longer. So instead, I'm modifying this little hat that I found at the craft store. I start by cutting through the sides and giving her some little ear holes, but as I'm trying it on her, I'm realizing that this hat is too tall for her little pea brain head. So to fix that, I gotta cut the top off, trim it down, then sew it all back together. But now we gotta put some ribbons on here to hide all this Frankensteining. I wanted to have a kind of dusty green ribbon, but all I could find was this lime color, so I threw it in a mix of brown and black dye soup, and I think the color actually turned out pretty close to what I wanted. I fold a part of the ribbon in half and sew it onto the hat band. I also want a ribbon to come down and tie beneath her chin and cover up these ugly ear holes too. So I sew a length of ribbon down the center of her hat, snip holes for the ears, and sew both of those edges down. This is a bit fiddly, but as the ribbons cover the ear holes, the ears cover the ribbons, so every mistake hides another. And lastly, I've been trying to figure out what to put on her hat to decorate it. I love the end with an E hat flower crown vibe, so I'm trying to sew on some little flowers that I dried, but unfortunately they're super fragile, so it was a bit of a struggle to get them to stay, and I'm honestly not sure how long they'll last, but that's a future me problem. Now that those were sewn on, I was finally able to tie up the little ribbon under her chin, and I hate it. Maybe I'm being a perfectionist, but I just don't like her. I feel like she's just all hunched over in this weird way, and she's got these small beady eyes instead of like big cute ones. And these hands, they're just like huge and Gumby compared to the rest of her. I just don't feel proud of her or like I want to really share her. So let's fix it. The most offending piece for me was the hands, so I started there. We just gotta rip them off and start from scratch. So back to the drawing board, I kinda need to figure out a totally new technique for making tiny posable hands, because this latex one is kinda the only one I know, and it doesn't seem like it's gonna work. I heard of this stuff called cosplay, which I guess is like Sculpey, but is flexible after it's baked, so I thought maybe it'd be flexible enough to be posable hands. Oh, and also I want to make this version replaceable in case one pair breaks, I'll have another that I can just like pop on, so I need to cut some interlocking brass tubes for that. Then I got to work on making the wire hand skeletons. I make these the same way that I did the first time around. The only difference is now I'm giving her 5 fingers because I'm hoping I can make the fingers small enough that she can have a full set. Okay, now fingers crossed that this works. I sloppily coated all of the wires with cosplay and then baked them so that the clay wouldn't keep sliding all over the wires while I tried to sculpt. Then I sculpted the actual forms of the hands. I tried to find a balance between human and mousy, but man, it's really hard to keep things at this tiny of a scale. And for context, my hands are actually really small, like my ring size is 3.5. And I like oval cut gems. Just in case anyone in particular watching this is wondering. Once I was happy with the sculpts, I baked them for 15 more minutes, and after they were cooled, I used liquid epoxy to glue those little nubs into their brass tube homes. A light dusting of pastel helped give the color a little bit more life, and they're done! And they work, they're actually posable. Here's the old hands and the new ones side by side so you can see the difference. I really think that the new ones look so much better. Perfectionism justified. Let's give these old hands a proper send-off. But we still have these arms to fix in the aftermath. One thing I'm adding this time is a little fur at the base of the wrist to have some poking out from under her sleeves. The changes I made to her hands and wrists actually ended up making her arms a little bit longer than they were before, which is kind of a minor change I wanted to make on my checklist anyway. But that meant I needed to make the sleeves longer now as well, so let's rip those sleeves off and get into Costume V2. This was mostly the same process as last time, I just needed to make the sleeves longer. Next, I sewed the skirt back on, which why did I pull it off in the first place? Do I crave tedium? Do I want nothing more than to do the same thing over and over again? And the final step was to reattach her apron and secure the straps. And now the costume is back together, and I'm actually really happy I was able to make some of these little fixes. Okay, this is a step that I'm a little afraid of, resculpting the face. Of course, I start by making a new epoxy putty base with magnets that will click into the head mount. Once that's cured, I pull it off and I can start sculpting. This process is pretty much the same as last time, but now with the biggest beads I had for the eyes. I want her to be as cute and wide-eyed and innocent as possible. This time I kept reminding myself that the fur will make the head like 15% bigger, so I just gotta keep curving it down and trying to keep it as small as I could manage. Eventually, I'm feeling satisfied, so I put her in the oven. And when I pulled it out, suddenly I hated it. It's like this sculpt was stolen by gremlins and swapped out with an ugly alien-looking one. How did my opinion change on this so much in 15 minutes? So I contemplated giving up forever, and then I tried one more time off camera because I felt like my brain was just turning into mush and I really needed to focus. And I thought it turned out okay. I let it sit for half a day before baking so I could look at it with fresh eyes before it was too late to change it. And at the end of the day, I was still satisfied, so I baked it. And then immediately afterwards thought it looked like a cat rather than a mouse, so I made a few more tweaks with clay, baked her again, and was finally happy. Okay, now let's move on to painting and fur. These parts of the process were totally the same as the last time, so I'm just gonna give you a little taste before we move on. This has been such a tough project, and it's even been really hard to figure out just how to edit this video because I don't want to make you watch the same thing twice. It feels like when you go to a movie and you think it's over, but then you realize there's another hour to go. But also, this is just the story of how it was made, and I want to show the ups and the downs of the process, so I don't know, I guess I'm just figuring this out as I go, but if you've watched this far, just thanks for sticking around. Okay, I think her face actually looks really cute now. I'm really glad I went back and redid it, even if it was a pain. I feel like I can see her personality so much more now. And now for the final step, fixing the hat. Now that her head is smaller, her hat needs to be too. I pulled the entire hat apart, cut off the excess, and stitched it all back together again. And by this point, basically all the flowers have already fallen off, so it was kind of decided for me that she was cute as she was. So with that, she is finally truly done. I swear, I'm not gonna do anything else to fix her. So we've made it this far, let's see the reveal. And after all that, I think she turned out really cute. And I don't know if you noticed, but she was really hard to make with a lot of bumps along the road, but I think that I ultimately proved that perfectionism is good actually. And I learned so many things while making her that I think will make my next critters that much easier. Please let me know what you thought of Ms. Mouse in the comments, maybe tell me which version of her you liked better. I've got a lot more fun crafting, costuming, Ren Fair, critter videos coming up, so please consider subscribing. Thanks so much to my partner Jakey for grip making, Googling services, and making all of the music for today's video. And thank you so much for watching. See you next time at Gobbler Girl Studio.